Hey guys, tonight we're going to tumble softly into the warm, dry winds of the Sahel, specifically into a day inside one of the script copying houses that once lined the mud brick towns of Mali and Mauritania. You'll be squinting at sun-faded scrolls, dodging camel stampedes, and trying to grind your own ink with the solemnity of a monk but the posture of someone who really needs a back pillow. It's dusty. It's quiet. It's historic in the most boring and delightful ways. And, to be honest, you probably won't survive this. The humidity's near zero, your sandals are made from flattened gourds, and breakfast consists of 3 dry dates and a prayer. But hey, at least the calligraphy is divine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and the current time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stir beneath a sleeping mat woven from palm fronds, its prickly edge tickling your cheek. Somewhere outside, a rooster attempts to audition for the role of town crier, badly. You sigh. His voice is a cracked trumpet. The sky is still a pre-dawn gray, painted in a hazy palette of ochres and sand. It's not cold, not exactly, but there's a dry bite in the breeze that sneaks through the wooden slats of your low-slung window. The air smells faintly of charcoal, ink, and someone baking flatbread far too early to be polite. You rise, your joints creaking like poorly oiled hinges, and wrap yourself in a plain cotton robe. Its hem stained by yesterday's ink disaster. Outside your doorway, the alley is a soft brown trench between tall mud brick walls. The architecture in this Sahelian town looks like it was dreamed up by a sleepy potter, smooth curves, jutting wooden beams, and a deep sense that everything here was meant to breathe with the earth, not against it. You make your way toward the scriptorium, your place of study and work. In the distance, you hear the soft thrum of drumming from the mosque. Not a call to arms or glory, just the slow heartbeat of a town waking up. You pause at a familiar street corner where a cracked basin sits beside an old fig tree. You splash your face with water that smells faintly of tin and time, and let the sunrise warm your skin as you prepare for another long, ink-stained day. The town, in the early hours, feels ancient and timeless. Children chase each other barefoot past goats chewing with philosophical patience. Someone sweeps sand off a rooftop with a woven broom, despite the futility. A camel, tethered lazily near a market stall, watches you like he knows your secrets. As you approach the scriptorium, the structure reveals itself like a puzzle box. Made of pale mud brick, it rises low and wide with only a few tiny windows set high, designed to keep out the dust and sun, not the boredom. The doorway is half your height, so you duck. Everyone ducks. Even the cat that sneaks in at lunchtime ducks. Inside, the air changes. It's cooler. Thicker. It smells of aged paper, soot, leather bindings, and a whisper of mold that somehow feels comforting. You remove your sandals, no one tracks sand into the sacred space of the written word, and step onto the woven reed mat that lines the entire floor. The room is long, lit only by slits of light leaking through carved shutters and the occasional oil lamp already flickering in the gloom. There are no chairs, of course. You'll be squatting, or kneeling, or inventing new vertebrae-altering postures by the hour. In the far corner, your instructor is already present. His name is Mukhtar, and he is older than logic. No one knows how long he's been transcribing here. Some say he was born with an ink pot in hand. Others claim he once corrected a caliph's spelling and lived to tell about it. His robe is spotless. His fingers are not. They are permanently tinted black from decades of soot and gum Arabic. He nods to you once, a gesture that means good morning, you're late, and you will not be allowed to use the good ink today. Around the room, other scribes are arriving. Each one finds their low wooden desk, a slanted board raised on bricks or books or whatever was lying around last century, and begins the sacred morning ritual, organizing quills, adjusting inkstones, and quietly judging each other's posture. You settle in beside your assigned stack of manuscripts, a sleepy collection of legal texts and a few loose pages that smell suspiciously like pickled onions. More on that later. A small bell chimes, just a metal spoon knocked gently against a brass bowl, and the day begins in earnest. You've made it inside. The air is still. The ink awaits. And the rooster, bless his persistent soul, is still yelling. Your knees are already regretting today. The floor of the scriptorium is made of tightly packed earth, softened only slightly by the reed mats beneath you. The low, carved wooden desk before you leans at an angle engineered for discomfort, but it's yours. Worn smooth by repetition. Covered in ghost stains of ink, oil, and possibly one incident involving tamarind paste that no one will ever own up to. The morning light spills thinly through narrow slits in the sandstone walls. It shifts slowly, catching the floating dust in golden shafts. You feel suspended in something sacred and sleepy, like history has hit the snooze button. Every wall of the room is lined with shelves carved directly into the mud brick. They're not shelves in the modern sense, no IKEA here, just rectangular cavities where bundles of manuscripts are wrapped in faded cloth, tied with leather thongs, and stacked like loaves of forgotten bread. Most are written in Arabic, though you'll spot Fulfulde, Songhai, and a little Tamashek if you look closely. The languages are layered like the dunes outside. You stretch, carefully, so as not to disturb the scribe beside you. His name is Jamal, and he's about 80% elbows. Thin, quiet, and astonishingly fast at copying. He's already halfway through a page of tafsir while you've only managed to sharpen your first reed pen. Again. Outside, the market begins to wake. You hear faint calls from vendors, hot millet cakes, fresh baobab leaves, and the bray of a donkey who either deeply resents his load or the concept of mornings in general. But in here, it's still sacred. A quiet furnace of thought and memory. Your eyes settle on your first task, copying a weathered legal commentary that's seen better centuries. The original is cracked at the spine, stitched together with horsehair and patience. The script is delicate and slightly tilted, the work of someone who probably used a lamp made from a turtle shell. You run your fingers lightly over the edge of the page and think, this survived dust storms, termites, and at least one sultan's temper tantrum. A low cough echoes across the room. Mukhtar stands up. No one ever sees him stand. One moment he's seated like a sage. The next, he's towering like a particularly disappointed tree. Today, he says without preamble, no one may begin copying until your desks are cleared of distractions. No mangoes. No gossip. No sketches of camels engaged in legal debates. A few scribes chuckle. One groans softly and starts folding away a suspiciously papaya-shaped bundle under his robe. You start arranging your tools. There is no ink yet, just preparation. Your inkstone is a flat piece of black slate, polished by decades of use. You brush it clean with the hem of your robe. Then, from the communal basket, you take your soot block, your acacia gum, and a small flask of water drawn that morning from the town's oldest well. This well, according to local legend, once produced water so cold it startled a visiting imam into reciting an accidental love poem. You scrape the soot, charcoal collected from burnt date palm fronds, into a fine pile on your inkstone. Then you squeeze a single sticky drop of gum arabic. The two substances eye each other suspiciously. Now comes the wrist work. You grind. You grind in slow circles. Quiet. Rhythmic. The paste darkens. A murky black sheen begins to spread, and the scent of ash and sap fills your nostrils. Your fingers start to cramp. Your back reminds you that ergonomic isn't a concept that's been invented yet. Across the room, Jamal mutters under his breath. He's miscopied a verse. Again. You both share a glance of shared agony. Historians still argue, Mukhtar suddenly intones from the far corner, whether calligraphy was first developed to glorify divine truths, or to punish the spines of the faithful. A few groggy laughs ripple across the room. Someone murmurs, both, and resumes grinding. Eventually, your ink is ready. Thick and glossy, like spilled midnight. You test it by dabbing a dot on your finger. It stains immediately, which is a good sign, or a terrible one, if your robe has recently been washed. You dip your reed pen, freshly trimmed with a bone knife so dull it may actually be cursed, and bring it to the page. The moment before you begin always stretches long. There's an odd weight to it. Like holding your breath before jumping into a still lake. Your first letter is a BA, a single line with a dot beneath it, delicate and centered. You press too hard. The ink bleeds. You wince. It's going to be one of those days. You continue anyway, carving each line with care. Arabic script flows right to left, curling and looping like wind-blown sand. You whisper each word as you write. It helps anchor the flow, keeps you in rhythm. In the quiet, you notice the sound of 30 pens at work. It's not quite scratching. Not quite tapping. More like a gentle rustling, as if the manuscripts are breathing through you. Your fingers smudge the edge of the page, and you curse under your breath in a language so old even your ancestors might blush. You glance at Mukhtar. He nods, almost imperceptibly. That nod means, yes, your page is ugly. But yes, you may continue. The room settles again. You are halfway through a paragraph on land inheritance laws when a shadow darkens your page. You look up. The cat is back. No one owns her, but everyone feeds her. She pads silently across the room, tail flicking, eyes judging. She walks directly over someone's inkwell and vanishes behind a stack of hadiths. You exhale. The day has barely begun, and already you are sore, stained, and slightly spiritually improved. Somewhere outside, the rooster crows again. Of course he does. You are exactly 1.5 paragraphs into your second manuscript when Mukhtar walks by, glances down at your page, and sighs so softly it sounds like a date leaf falling. That's the worst sign of all. A sigh from Mukhtar doesn't mean disaster. No, disaster comes with shouting, flung sand, and sometimes a thrown shoe. A sigh, however, means he's disappointed. Quietly. Deeply. Possibly even spiritually. You lower your pen in shame. Your cough curves like a lazy goat, he says without looking at you. You don't reply. There's no good answer to that. He moves on, muttering about the structural integrity of script and the downfall of precision in youth, and you do what any scribe under pressure would do, you discreetly nibble a piece of dried mango from your sleeve pocket. It's old, fibrous, and tastes vaguely of ink, but it calms you. The mango always calms you. You sit up straighter and try again. Your reed pen hovers. You focus. This time, you remember to breathe. You guide the stroke with care, shaping each letter like a prayer whispered in a sandstorm. That's when Jamal sneezes. A full-bodied, cat-scaring, manuscript-threatening explosion of a sneeze. It echoes across the room like a cannon in a clay amphitheater. You freeze. Everyone freezes. Jamal looks horrified. His page, once immaculate, is now speckled with unspeakable droplets. The manuscript will need to be sanded, maybe dried in the sun. Or exorcised. Mukhtar says nothing. He just holds out a clean cloth and walks away. Jamal weeps softly. You turn back to your page, now acutely aware of the dangers posed by nasal passages. You press on, your strokes more precise, your soul slightly haunted. To your left, Aisha is sketching something in the margin of her text. You sneak a glance. It's a goat. A flying goat. You raise an eyebrow. She grins mischievously and mouths the word, a metaphor. This, you know, is a long-standing debate. Historians still argue whether the whimsical illustrations found in Sahelian manuscripts were purely decorative, sly moral commentary, or the result of chronic boredom mixed with too much fermented baobab fruit. The margins of these manuscripts are a world unto themselves. Tiny camels balancing on trees, crocodiles in turbans, even one infamous manuscript in Timbuktu that featured a three-headed chicken and the words, "Don't trust the baker." Scholars have no idea what it means. But here, in your quiet scriptorium, it's an accepted art form. You even spot someone outlining a miniature donkey holding a scroll. Probably a joke about last week's lecture on scholarly humility. You decide to contribute. Near the bottom of your page, in the empty space between a passage on crop rotation and divine jurisprudence, you draw a small bird. It's fat, round, slightly confused looking. It brings you joy. Your ink is running low, so you stand and shuffle over to the back of the room where the ink supplies are kept. The storage cabinet is an uneven wooden box with mismatched doors. Inside, a chaotic paradise. Bottles of dried pigment, broken quills, folded parchment, and a mysterious lump labeled "Do Not Eat." You refill your ink and sneak a sniff of the spice pouch hidden in the back, cloves and cinnamon. Someone's been stashing scent aids again. You make a mental note to investigate later. As you return to your desk, the front door creaks open. Everyone looks up. A new arrival. He's short, wide, and shaped like a bread oven in motion. His turban is far too large, and he's carrying a satchel that looks like it contains either priceless manuscripts or his entire lunch history. He's also grinning, which means trouble. "Shipment's in," he announces, dropping the bag with a dramatic thud. The room erupts in murmurs. New materials. New parchment. Maybe even Egyptian imports real vellum made from calfskin, smooth enough to make your reed pen weep with gratitude. Mukhtar appears out of nowhere, like a disappointed genie. He opens the satchel, inspects the goods, and nods slowly. "The vellum is acceptable," he says. The merchant is not. The room chuckles. The merchant bows exaggeratedly, clearly unbothered. Bartering begins. You make your move quickly. 3 cowries. A dried figure. And one of Aisha's margin drawings that you convinced her to let you trade. You whisper a riddle to the merchant to seal the deal. What has a spine but no bones, a tongue but says only what you write? He grins and hands you a small, soft sheet of Egyptian vellum. You cradle it like treasure. It is treasure. As you return to your spot, Mukhtar watches silently. Then, with the ghost of a smirk, he says, "Don't waste it on goats." You bow slightly and sit. The page before you gleams faintly in the filtered sunlight. You stroke its surface with reverence. You think, this sheet once belonged to an animal. It now belongs to knowledge. And soon, if your pen behaves, it will belong to history. You exhale. Pick up your reed pen. Begin again. This time, your cough curves just right. The inkstone is still warm from your hand. You've only just laid down the first graceful line on your vellum when Mukhtar, like some vulture of quality control, sweeps past again. He casts a glance, lingers a beat too long, then does something rare. He nods. An actual, silent nod of approval. You beam. Not outwardly, of course. This is still a Sahelian script copying house, not a market full of spice vendors bragging about their coriander, but your soul does a little celebratory spin. Inspired, you decide to take the long route to your next task, preparing the day's ink batch for the apprentices. They're too young to do it themselves yet, which is probably for the best. Last time, one of them tried to flavor it with hibiscus powder for beauty. The manuscript still smells like flower tea in failure. You head to the back courtyard, a small open-air annex just behind the main scriptorium. It's walled in mud brick and shaded by a woven canopy of dried palm fronds. A few pots rest on low shelves. Pestles. Grinding stones. A shallow basin for soaking acacia sap. You sit cross-legged on the warm earth and lay out your materials. The soot today is fine black as sorrow, sifted from yesterday's cooking fires. You add a drop of gum arabic and begin grinding again, slow and circular. It's meditative, like stirring memories into a paste. The sap resists at first, sticking to your fingers and clumping into tiny tar-colored lumps. You coax it into obedience with a few drops of well water. This well, they say, runs beneath the old mosque and is cooled by the breath of ancestors who used to transcribe poems here. Of course, someone also claims a snake lives down there and guards a manuscript so old it's written in dreams. You choose to believe both versions. As you stir, the smell rises woody, smoky, tangy, and it hits something deep in your chest. The Sahel has many perfumes. Tamarind on hot stone, sand after rain, camel sweat, ink on hide. But this one, soot and gum, is the smell of patience. You test the mixture with a bit of reed straw. The ink flows smoothly dark, almost blue in sunlight. You smile. Job done. You walk the mixture back inside in a shallow ceramic bowl. The apprentices sit in a nervous huddle, their quills chewed to mush. One boy named Amadou reaches for the ink before you're fully seated, and you smack his hand gently. Respect the ink, you whisper. He nods, cowed. The scriptorium continues its hum. Quills whisper across parchment. Pages rustle. Someone lets out a slow breath and murmurs a line of hadith under their breath. A page is turned. Another is torn. A collective gasp. It's Jamal. Again. He's torn the edge of a page while attempting a flourish on the letter gain. A complicated character with a curling top and two dots above, tricky even on a good day. He holds it aloft like a wounded bird. Mukhtar doesn't even blink. Patch it, he says, without looking up. Or rewrite it. Or offer it to the wind. There is no pity here. Only practice. You return to your own work. The vellum gleams beneath your hand, and you begin the next line with more confidence. Each word is part of a legal treatise on debt and livestock exchanges. It's not exactly thrilling, but there's a poetry to it. A rhythm. A silent heartbeat of rules and balance. Halfway through, you glance over at Aisha. She's sketching again. This time, it's a donkey wearing a scholar's hat. You raise an eyebrow. Legal commentary, she mouths. You grin. A few feet away, a breeze stirs the corner of someone's manuscript. The windows are still slitted and high, but the air finds its way in, carrying the scent of dust and sun-warmed date palm. You sigh. Shift your posture. Realize your foot's gone numb.
and that's when the bell rings.
Not a clock, not a chime, but an old copper bowl struck with a wooden spoon once, sharply.
It echoes through the chamber like an exclamation mark. Ink time is over. It's time for a break. And in this script house, that means tea.
You follow the others out to the side chamber, half open to the sky, with low benches carved directly from packed earth. A young girl passes around steaming cups of sweet tea ataya, brewed strong and sugared beyond belief. You sip. The bitterness hits first. Then the warmth. Then the overwhelming sweetness that coats your tongue and convinces your brain you've briefly become a gazelle in a syrup factory. Conversations spark up. Soft laughter. Someone starts a tale about a wandering scholar who tried to pay for a manuscript with a camel that wasn't his. The camel, it turns out, had memorized more Quran than the scholar. You don't ask for proof. You just let it wash over you. A cat weaves between ankles. The air is warm and golden. Someone plays a two-stringed hadu in the distance, its notes drifting lazily like kites on a breeze. You think, this is what memory feels like. You finish your tea. Stretch. Let the sugar settle into your bones. The bell rings again. Time to return to the ink. You shuffle back inside the scriptorium with the rest of the scribes, your feet still tingling from the tea and your limbs a little looser than before. The midday heat has arrived. It doesn't knock. It just slides in quietly, settles on your shoulders like a wool blanket, and dares you to complain. Inside, the atmosphere has shifted. No longer hushed reverence. Now it's the low hum of focused resistance, the kind of stubborn work that happens when you know you'll be copying letters until your knees forget how to unbend. You drop to your spot with a soft grunt. To your right, Aisha fans herself with a sheet of rough parchment. Jamal's sweating into his collar and looking like he's rethinking his entire calling. Someone's accidentally dipped a sleeve in their ink pot and is trying to pretend it's fashionable. In other words, Scribe Hour, Part 2. You pick up your pen. But before you can touch the vellum, Mukhtar speaks. Today, he announces from the front, no one is allowed to complain about the heat until their manuscript begins to melt. He pauses. And by melt, I mean liquefy, spontaneously combust, or scream. Polite laughter ripples through the room. It's too hot to laugh properly. You continue. The afternoon is devoted to the heavy stuff, complicated commentaries, dense legalisms, and philosophical debates that make your skull itch. Your current assignment is a disputed interpretation of a verse concerning animal debt, grazing rights, and something that might involve donkeys staging a legal appeal. Historians still argue whether this particular text was satire or simply a product of overworked jurists with too much sun exposure. You soldier on. Every word you write must be perfect. Not just legible. Not just correct. Beautiful. Balanced. Flowing. Mukhtar often says that a poorly drawn meme is more offensive than theft. You believe him. The vellum is slick beneath your hand, warm from your skin. The ink glistens as it dries. Black turning a soft matte, occasionally reflecting light like tiny obsidian stones. You pause after each sentence to dust it lightly with a fine sand from the riverbank, which soaks up excess ink and gives your words a crisp edge. That's when it happens. A creak. Then a sudden yelp. A scribe has fainted. The room freezes. His body has flopped directly across an unfinished page, face down in the middle of a passage on marital inheritance rights. He twitches once, then snores. Mukhtar appears immediately. No panic. No fuss.
He checks the boy's pulse, nods, and waves over 2 apprentices.
They carry the poor lad to the shaded hallway and place a damp cloth on his forehead. "You may resume," Mukhtar says, as though nothing happened.
And just like that, you do. Because in the Sahelian script houses, heat-induced manuscript collapses are practically seasonal. You work slower now.
The air feels heavier.
Even the ink begins to change. Thicker, lazier, like it too wants a nap. Your page is beginning to show the signs.
The edge curls slightly.
One corner seems to warp just enough to throw off your alignment. You mutter under your breath.
You prop up the page with a broken piece of brick and sigh. In the corner, the cat reappears and makes a show of collapsing dramatically next to someone's ink pot.
She yawns. Licks her paw. Clearly thriving.
Aisha passes you a fig from her satchel. You nod in thanks, eat it in 3 chews, and regret not savoring it.
Behind you, someone is whispering prayers.
Not loudly, just softly enough that the syllables ripple through the room like the hush of fabric brushing stone. You finish your page. Set it carefully on the drying rack, a slatted wooden frame suspended from the ceiling, where the warm air bakes each manuscript like a loaf of law-filled bread.
Then you unroll your next assignment. And freeze.
It's a page from the Chronicle of the Black Sultan, one of the rare narrative texts that somehow made it into the otherwise deeply practical Sahelian manuscript tradition. It tells of a local ruler whose reign included talking birds, tax-collecting giraffes, and one mysterious event referred to only as the Peanut Incident.
You smile. This is your favorite.
The margin of the page has a small doodle, a man being carried by 4 squirrels.
You wonder if it was deliberate.
You add your own flourish, a tiny antelope peeking out from behind a bush, eyes wide in alarm.
Aisha sees it. Nods. Across the room, the apprentices are preparing the next round of ink.
One of them drops the pestle and curses.
Loudly. Mukhtar lifts a single eyebrow.
The boy blanches and whispers an apology to the ink itself.
The manuscript smells faintly of beeswax.
It's a trick used by older scribes, coating the pages lightly to preserve them against moisture and pests.
The wax softens in the heat, giving the parchment a sheen and a scent. You wonder how many generations this page will last. Maybe 2. Maybe 20.
Maybe one day someone in a dusty library will lift it from a chest and wonder who added the tiny antelope.
The thought makes you smile.
Your pen scratches on.
The sweat drips. The letters bloom. Outside, the rooster crows again.
You're almost certain he's doing it just to mock you. You're halfway through the Chronicle of the Black Sultan, carefully outlining a particularly flamboyant sentence involving dancing ostriches and taxation policies, when Aisha leans over and whispers, "Look at the corner."
You glance down. At the very edge of the parchment,
in a space no bigger than your thumbnail, someone long ago drew a chicken.
Wearing a crown. You stare at it. The line work is delicate. Almost reverent.
The beak curves up into something resembling a smile.
Aisha raises an eyebrow. You whisper, "Royal poultry." She nods solemnly. A very unstable dynasty.
You both return to your work, lips twitching, minds momentarily freed by the absurd. That's how scribes survive the long days, through the little rebellions, the marginal beasts, the sly footnotes, the impossible metaphors.
Of course, not everyone is amused.
2 desks down, a stern-faced scribe named Malik is bent over a legal manuscript so furrowed with rulings and redactions it looks like it's been through 5 court trials and a thunderstorm.
He does not doodle. He does not joke. He once banned someone from eating spicy dates in his presence because it was too joyful. You decide not to show him the crowned chicken. The heat has deepened. You can feel it pooling in the corners of the room. Even the flies have stopped buzzing. They just hover in the air, confused and exhausted. You wipe your brow and squint at your next assignment. It's a commentary on astronomy, something to do with planetary alignments and seasonal planting schedules. You make it through 2 lines before the letters start swimming. Not metaphorically. They actually seem to dance slightly on the page. You blink. And that's when the breeze hits. A sudden gust, sharp and bold, blasts through the high slits in the wall. It flips 3 manuscripts into the air. Someone shrieks. The cat bolts. Dust storms into the room like it's been personally offended. Then, hoofbeats. You freeze. From outside, the unmistakable sound of a camel. Several camels. Possibly stampeding. Everyone looks to Mukhtar. He closes his manuscript slowly. Stands. Walks to the doorway. A moment passes. Then, from outside, not again. You rush after him with the others, crowding into the low courtyard. And there it is, chaos. A cluster of camels, clearly confused, has stumbled into the outer plaza. Their herder, a teenager in a panic, is flapping a scarf and yelling instructions that the camels are ignoring with dignified contempt. They're not exactly stampeding. It's more of a stubborn shuffle. But it's headed directly toward the scriptorium wall. Mukhtar pinches the bridge of his nose. Jamal, he says, fetch the basin. Jamal, to his credit, sprints like he's being chased by the ghost of a spelling mistake. He returns with the large copper basin usually reserved for washing inkstones. Mukhtar steps forward, fills it quickly with water from the courtyard jug, and throws it into the air, not at the camels, but in a grand arc that splashes loudly onto the dirt in front of them. The lead camel halts. The others pile up behind it, all blinking in what you assume is camel confusion. There's a long pause. Then, slowly, they turn. With the grumpiest of dignity, they shuffle off. The herder bows in frantic thanks. Mukhtar sighs. Again. You all file back inside, brushing dust from your robes and checking your manuscripts for hoofprints. The cat returns 5 minutes later, looking deeply offended. As you resettle, you notice something horrifying. One of your pages is missing. You scan the room. Check under your desk. Nothing. You glance up and see it. One lone page fluttering gently near the roof, caught on one of the high wooden beams that supports the scriptorium's ceiling. You stare. Consider your options. Then you do the only thing that makes sense. You stack 2 low desks. Carefully. Very carefully. Then you climb. Every scribe watches. You reach the top beam, stretch a hand, and snag the edge of the page just before it flutters away again. Victory! You descend. Slowly. Reverently. The entire room erupts into polite, silent applause, the kind of applause that says, "Well done, but please don't make this a habit." You reseat yourself, heart still thumping. Aisha leans over and whispers, "You were very brave." You whisper back, "I did it for the Chicken King." And just like that, the quiet rhythm resumes. Pen scratch. Ink glistens. A gecko clicks from somewhere behind the wall. The scriptorium lives again. You resume your work with renewed focus, writing not just for preservation but for the joy of absurdity, the truth that somewhere,
in the corners of ancient manuscripts, joy and nonsense have always lived. The light has shifted again. What was once golden and sharp has mellowed into something warm and dusky, the kind of light that slants just enough to make every fleck of dust seem like a tiny star suspended in the air. It filters through the slits high above your head, splashing long shadows across the parchment. It's beautiful. It's romantic. It's absolutely the worst lighting for copying text. You lean in, squinting. Your eyes are dry. Your spine feels like it's slowly transforming into a Sahelian question mark. You stretch carefully, because no one wants to be the second scribe to faint today. Across the room, Malik is reciting under his breath again. You catch snippets, something about dead law and the price of stolen goats. His copy is flawless. You wonder if he even blinks. Your own work, however, has taken a strange turn. The manuscript in front of you is labeled Miscellaneous Medical Observations, Regional and Questionable. The script is old, the ink slightly faded, and the pages smell unusual. You bring the sheet closer to your face. Yes. Definitely onions. You pause, check your fingers, the desk, the breeze, nope. The parchment itself reeks faintly of sautéed onion and something spicier, almost vinegary. You're certain of it now. You glance around. No one else is reacting. Either this is normal, or the heat has robbed your peers of their olfactory will to live. You flip the page carefully. The text is bizarre. A list of treatments, many of which involve items you would not typically place near open wounds. One line reads, "For fever of the teeth, apply poultice of crushed locust wing and vinegar thrice beneath the moon." You blink. Historians still argue whether these recipes were medicinal instructions, satirical commentary, or extremely elaborate pranks from a scribe with too much time and not enough supervision. You make a note in the margin, source dubious. Also, onion? You press on. The next entry involves goat's milk and ash. The one after that simply says, "Consult the whispering tree." No directions. No clarification. You sincerely hope that's metaphorical. You finish the onion manuscript and set it aside to dry, hoping the smell doesn't haunt you. You'll probably smell it in your dreams. Or your next bowl of millet. At the front of the room, Mukhtar announces the arrival of a guest. Everyone straightens. A visiting scholar enters. Tall, wrapped in indigo robes, face weathered by travel and sand. He bows deeply, his turban trailing dust and dignity. He carries with him a scroll case made from engraved brass. Mukhtar receives it like it's a newborn child. Unlatches it with care. Inside, a single rolled parchment, tied with faded crimson thread. Everyone leans in. From Gao, the guest says, by way of Jen. It speaks of the moon. A low hum ripples through the room. Moon manuscripts are rare. Precious. Often filled with poetic allegories and questionable science. A scribe once claimed the moon was a luminous fish that rose nightly from the river to stare longingly at the stars. Another insisted it was the eye of a giant woman who slept beneath the earth and only opened her left eye. The truth is no one quite agrees. Which is the perfect fuel for scribes who live to copy, debate, and daydream. Mukhtar unfurls the scroll. The script is dense and curling, and you can already tell it will take hours to copy properly. Naturally, he hands it to you. You try to look honored, not terrified. Back at your desk, you unroll the scroll slowly. The text begins with a phrase that makes your heart flutter, of that which the moon reveals, and that which she hides. Oh, it's going to be that kind of manuscript. You dive in. Each line is a dreamy weave of astronomy, poetry, mysticism, and what may or may not be a veiled insult toward eclipses. You copy with reverence, letting the words pull you into their rhythm. Your pen strokes become more fluid, more graceful. You forget the heat. You forget the onions. You forget that your leg has gone completely numb again. All you know is ink, and vellum, and moonlight that lives on a page. Then, from behind you, a crash. You whip around. The apprentices have knocked over the ink basin again. There is a spreading puddle, a fallen quill, and 3 teenagers trying to blame each other using only eye contact. Mukhtar doesn't speak. He just gestures toward the mop. Everyone knows the mop. It lives in the corner like a cursed relic. It smells like vinegar and regret. You used it once. You swore never again. But the apprentices faithfully, tearfully, carry it out. Disaster averted. Back at your desk, the moon manuscript gleams. You finish the final sentence just as the light shifts again. The room is bathed in a golden haze now, sunset pressing long rectangles of warmth through the high windows. Outside, the call to prayer begins. You sit back. Close your eyes. Let the words drift off your mind like steam rising from warm ink. The cat purrs somewhere in the rafters. And the scroll in front of you smells, mercifully, of nothing at all. You rise slowly, your legs disagreeing with the entire concept of movement. The muscles in your back sound like they're reciting their own separate legal commentary. But the moon manuscript is complete, the ink has dried, and even Malik, sitting like a stone, gave you a tiny nod of approval when he saw the opening line. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a warning. With Malik, it could be either. The call to prayer fades into the rustling wind. It's late afternoon now. The heat has begun to retreat, slinking out of the walls and leaving behind the scent of sun-baked earth and cooled stone. The apprentices finish sweeping the floor, though in truth, sweeping a Sahelian scriptorium is more symbolic than effective. The dust always wins. You step outside into the courtyard for a moment of fresh air. The sky is the color of ripe apricots. A few swallows dart overhead, catching the last of the insects. You sit beneath the fig tree, feeling the rough bark against your spine, and take a deep breath. Aisha joins you, carrying 2 cups of lukewarm tamarind tea. She hands one over and sits cross-legged, her robe stained with the same blotches of ink and effort as yours. Neither of you speaks for a while. Then she says, "You ever wonder if they'll read our copies 100 years from now?" You sip. Think. I wonder if they'll laugh at the goat. She smirks. It is a very judgmental goat. You both sit in silence, watching the light slide across the courtyard floor. A group of children runs by outside the wall, kicking a bundle of rags tied with rope. Their laughter is high and echoing. You return inside. There's one task left before dusk, copying a dedication into the front of a newly bound manuscript. It's a short passage, traditionally added to every work completed within the house. The script is ceremonial, rounded, balanced, demanding perfect symmetry. You take a fresh sheet, warm your fingers, and begin. In the name of the most merciful, this humble record has been copied by the hand of, you hesitate. Technically, you're allowed to sign your name. Most scribes don't. Tradition leans toward anonymity, self-erased in service of the sacred text. But today you feel the weight of the day, the sweat, the sneezing, the moon poetry, the royal chicken. You want to remember this. You sign, simply, in the bottom corner. By the hand of the sleepiest scribe in the Sahel. Aisha sees it. Laughs out loud.
Mukhtar walks past at that exact moment. He stops, looks down, reads it. Then he mutters, finally, some honesty, and walks away. You take it as approval. As you lay the finished sheet on the drying rack, the last rays of sunlight slice across the room. You catch the moment in stillness, every scribe bathed in amber light, their faces glowing, their eyes soft. The cat is curled in a windowsill, tail twitching like a metronome for some slow, dusty song. It's beautiful. Quiet. Eternal. You're just turning to clean your tools when something flutters past your shoulder. A page. An old one, yellowed, crinkled, illegible in parts, drifting slowly to the floor from one of the ceiling beams. You catch it mid-air. It's strange. The script isn't Arabic. It's older. Possibly Songhai syllabary, or something borrowed from Berber traders long past. Faded ink, ornate glyphs, little decorative marks shaped like fish and suns. You hold it up. Aisha peers over your shoulder. What is it? I don't know. You turn it over. No title. No explanation. Mukhtar appears. That, he says slowly, is from the lost bin. You blink. The what? He points to a dusty corner behind a low shelf, partially hidden by a collapsed reed mat. You move toward it and uncover a narrow box. Wooden, cracked, sealed with a strip of goat leather so dry it breaks at your touch. Inside, maybe 20 pages. Unbound. Unnumbered. Written in a variety of hands and languages. Diagrams. Star charts. Poems. At least one recipe involving fig leaves and salt. You pull out another page. This one is mostly symbols and drawings, circles nested inside squares, strange lines looping like serpents eating their own tails. Mukhtar leans on his cane. The bin, he says, was for pages no one could explain. Or dared to throw away. Are we allowed to copy them? He shrugs. Only if you enjoy riddles. You sit. Aisha joins you. Together, you lay out the strange texts on the floor. Their edges curl like they've been trying to become scrolls again. You light a small oil lamp to see better. Its flame flickers across the symbols. And just like that, the scriptorium becomes a chamber of mysteries. You pick up your pen, dabbing it gently into the remaining ink. The first word is unreadable. You copy it anyway. The oil lamp flickers, and the unknown symbols seem to shimmer with it as if the words themselves were shifting in the heat, refusing to be pinned down like common language. You stare at the first glyph again. It could be a bird. Or a flame. Or maybe just the result of someone sneezing mid-stroke in the 12th century. You lean closer. The script doesn't flow right to left like Arabic. Nor left to right like Latin. It spirals from the center of the page outward, a slow unfurling of thought like a seed growing into a vine. You whisper to yourself, so, this is going to be fun. Aisha has taken one of the other pages, a chart of stars drawn with tiny precision and what appears to be a goat walking across the night sky. She mutters, Sagittarius? Or just a goat with opinions? You both fall into a rhythm. Copying the strange documents word for word, curve for curve. You're not translating, not interpreting. Just preserving. Letting the mystery breathe through your hands. And that's enough. By now, the scriptorium is lit only by lamps and moonlight. The day's formal tasks are done. Most scribes have drifted off into the courtyard to stretch, gossip, or begin the endless process of removing ink from clothing.
You, Aisha, and Malik remain, each of you engaged in a different kind of quiet. Malik, it turns out, is also curious. He kneels beside you and peers at the page, his ever-stern expression tightening just a bit.
This symbol, he murmurs, pointing to a looped triangle nestled inside a box. I've seen it before.
You look at him, surprised. In an old treatise from Katsina, he adds, titled On the Movements of Dust and Stars.
You blink. Are you making that up? Malik doesn't answer.
Which means he isn't.
Historians still argue whether these fringe documents,
star maps, riddles, recipes, lunar calendars that also double as dream journals, were scientific notes, mystical guides, or just the world's first multitasking doodle pads. But to the scribes here, they're treasure. And now, you're part of the chain that keeps them alive. You finish the spiral script and sit back, fingers blackened, eyes blurry, soul oddly content.
That's when a commotion erupts at the entrance. A donkey has entered the scriptorium. Not metaphorically. A real donkey.
Gray, wide-eyed, and clearly having second thoughts about its choices. It clops forward, hooves loud on the floor, trailing a length of rope and the faint smell of straw.
Everyone stares. The donkey pauses by Malik's desk. Sniffs a half-finished manuscript. Sneezes. You lock eyes with Aisha.
Do not, she whispers, draw this in the margin.
You already are. Mukhtar enters behind the donkey, rubbing his forehead like a man who's finally accepted that fate cannot be negotiated.
Remove it, he says, to no one in particular. It takes 3 apprentices, a piece of dried melon, and a surprisingly persuasive cat to lead the donkey out again.
Balance restored. You return to the page. Now, it's your turn to review today's work.
Before anything can be stored or sealed, every page must be recited aloud, checked for errors, and if needed, scraped clean and re-inked.
Scraping is no joke.
It involves a flat knife, a steady hand, and a prayer to avoid slicing through the entire sheet.
The phrase "to scrape your sins" is both theological and extremely practical here. You begin with your morning work.
The legal text on livestock debt. You murmur the lines, tracing each word with your finger. Then the onion manuscript.
You gag slightly. Keep going.
Then the moon scroll. You slow down here. Let the words roll over your tongue like poetry. Even Malik closes his eyes for that part.
Finally, the spiral text. No one knows what it means. That's fine. You read it anyway.
As you do, a strange calm descends. Not silence, there's still the scrape of ink, the click of lamps, the purring of the ever-present cat, but a calmness deeper than sound.
Unknowing.
Somewhere in this room, 1,000 years of voices live in parchment. And tonight, you've added one more. You rise and stretch, spine crackling like a dry reed. Aisha does the same, groaning like someone twice her age.
Dinner, she asks. You nod.
The 2 of you make your way out to the courtyard, where a small pot of millet porridge bubbles over a clay stove.
Someone's brought dates. Someone else offers dried fish. There is 1 cup of camel's milk that has clearly turned and is being politely ignored. You eat with your fingers, sit on the ground, and listen to the breeze. Overhead, the stars emerge one by one. You spot the goat constellation again. Still walking. Still proud.
Tomorrow, Malik says quietly, we'll catalog the spiral text.
You nod. And just like that, a new task is born.
You wake from a short, accidental nap with a fig leaf stuck to your cheek. Somewhere between Malik's declaration about cataloging the spiral manuscript and your second helping of millet porridge, you dozed off beside the low courtyard wall. Not for long, just enough for your body to momentarily forget the dozens of contorted positions it endured all day. The courtyard is dim now, bathed in that soft post-dusk indigo that slips over the Sahel like a silk scarf. The lamps inside the scriptorium are still burning, flickering behind shuttered windows like secret thoughts. You sit up, dust the leaf from your face, and stretch. Your joints creak in protest. Your ink-stained fingers are curled like claws. Aisha is already inside again, dutifully organizing the drying rack. Malik has returned to his manuscript as if nothing ever happened. You follow, entering the scriptorium like a traveler stepping into a candlelit cave. There's a new task now. Organizing, cataloging, and, if you're lucky, reading between the lines of the old spiral manuscript. You kneel beside the long wooden cabinet near the back wall, a cabinet reserved for the odd, the obscure, and the unreasonably beloved. Inside are wrapped scrolls and loose pages, bits of manuscript that have been recovered from termite-bitten corners or donated by dusty travelers who didn't know what they were carrying. Each item here has a story. One bundle, marked with a red thread, is known as the Debate of the Two Shadows. You've tried to read it. But grammar changes halfway through. At one point, the sun begins arguing with a tree. Another text, written on hide instead of parchment, contains a timeline that seems to run backward, from death to birth, and ends with the sentence, "Begin again, but differently." You copied that one purely out of spite. You placed the spiral manuscript beside them, careful not to smudge your earlier work. Then you sit and begin drafting the catalog entry. Title, unknown. Origin, presumed Sahelian, though stylistic elements suggest Berber influence. Script, circular progression. Symbols, repeating triangle box loop, moon icons, fish-shaped glyphs. Smell, blessedly neutral. Condition, slightly warped edges, well-preserved ink. You pause, then add, interpretation, none offered. Reader may proceed at own risk. Satisfied, you tie it gently with fresh cloth and slip it into the archive shelf. You exhale deeply, more from ritual than relief. That's one mystery preserved. For now. You move next to the tools cabinet to clean your reed pens. Each one is different. You have a favorite, it's slightly curved, like a scythe, carved from river reed and darkened with years of use. There's also the temperamental one that bleeds too easily, the stubby one that only works on coarse parchment, and the one you keep purely for drawing animals in the margins. You rinse them in a basin of cool water, the soot blooming out like clouds. As you dry them on the woven cloth, you notice a smear of red, dried hibiscus ink. Someone's been experimenting again. You smirk. You'll deal with that mystery later. As you turn, Mukhtar is there. You blink. How does he keep doing that? He nods at the tools. Good pens are like old friends, he says. They fail you only when you forget to care for them. You nod solemnly, unsure if it's a proverb or a warning. Then he adds, you may take the morning off tomorrow. You nearly drop the cloth. A morning off? You've heard tales of such things. Rest. Leisure. A nap that doesn't involve a fig leaf. He continues, use it to think. Or to forget. Sometimes, both are needed. You bow deeply. As he vanishes again into the shadows, you glance down at your ink-stained hands and wonder how many more pages they'll hold before they, too, fade into dust in memory. From the far corner, Aisha calls your name. She's holding something new, an unbound stack of parchment just delivered by a courier from the north. The edges are still curled from travel, and the top page bears a curious diagram: a sun, a river, and a hand reaching toward both. She looks at you with the grin of someone who knows she's about to drag you into another late-night mystery. You sigh, smile, and follow her. The new manuscript is philosophical, bordering on poetic, maybe even prophetic. It speaks of water memory, of songs carried by wind, of a desert that remembers every footprint. You and Aisha divide the pages. Yours involves a curious tale about a woman who dreamt the entire Quran in a single night, and when she awoke, her pillow was covered in stars. The script is sharp, elegant, and sprinkled with symbols that look suspiciously like vegetables. Aisha whispers, "I think this one's about gardening." You whisper back, "I think it's about dreams." "Same thing," she shrugs. As the hours stretch on, the room softens. The lamps burn lower. The air cools. You're no longer working. You're wandering. Every word copied now feels like a footprint in deep sand, soft, deliberate, unhurried. You're not preserving. You're drifting. Letting your pen float on thought. And that's when the laughter starts. From outside. Soft at first, then a rising chorus of giggles. You step into the courtyard. A group of children has gathered just beyond the wall, chasing a scrap of cloth that's been tied to a stick. They're pretending it's a bird. Or a dragon. Or maybe a page come to life. You watch as they run and spin, the moonlight catching their silhouettes. You think, this is why we write. Not for glory. Not for certainty. But so someone, someday, can dream again. You're still watching the children play in the courtyard when one of them notices you. A girl with braids like coiled rope grins, waves, and holds up her pretend bird, a torn strip of parchment fluttering on a stick. You wave back, but inwardly, you wince. That's definitely from an old manuscript. Probably something no one will miss, like an index of goat prices by decade, but still. Sacred text now flying over a dirt patch like it's been reincarnated as a kite. You'll let it slide. You step back into the scriptorium, where the last light of the oil lamps flickers over shelves and sleeping tools. The air is still. Even the ever-judging cat has vanished, probably off to steal fish or whisper secrets to the geckos in the rafters. Only Malik remains at his desk. You approach slowly. He's staring at a single sheet, unmoving. The page before him is blank except for a sentence at the top, written in crisp, elegant hand. This is the story of a word that disappeared. You wait, expecting him to speak. He doesn't. So you sit across from him and stare at the page together. After a long pause, he murmurs, "Do you think that's literal? Or poetic?" You consider. It's definitely bait. He almost smiles. Almost. The two of you stay like that for a while, two scribes staring at a mystery neither knows how to copy. You're too tired to solve it. But not too tired to wonder. Eventually, Malik folds the page and slips it into the box labeled "Pending Insanity." You help him seal it. Then you both rise and stretch in unison, two ink-drenched marionettes trying to remember what standing up straight felt like in youth. Aisha reappears, holding a stack of freshly bound manuscripts. She's humming an old Songhai tune, something about clouds and millet and how love is like a goat that never comes when it's called. She hands you a copy. It's your own work from 3 weeks ago, clean, pressed, and bound in leather dyed with indigo and charcoal. The title glows faintly in gold leaf, on the duties of the faithful with regard to soil, seed, and sacred water. You flip through the pages, noting your own handwriting with the odd sensation of distance. Did you really write this?
That meme looks crooked. That tie is definitely too wide. And, oh no, there's the goat you doodled in the margin. You cough and try to hide it. Malik sees. Doesn't comment. Aisha, of course, chuckles. Your legacy, she says. You mutter, that goat was meant to be symbolic. Of what? Unclear. She takes the manuscript back and places it gently into the long storage chest beneath the back shelf. It joins the others, dozens, maybe hundreds, of volumes copied by hand over decades, each one waiting for some future mind to pull it from the dark and read it again. You realize. You're not just preserving knowledge. You're scattering seeds into the wind of time, hoping something will grow. Outside, the breeze returns. It whispers through the slats in the wall and dances along the parchment. It carries the scent of cooling earth, of stone, of old ink and older words. The apprentices return, trailing laughter and the smell of roasted nuts. They bring with them the final task of the evening, cleaning. Ink pots must be emptied. Pens dried. Manuscripts stacked in proper order. Even the chalkboard listing the copying assignments gets wiped clean, its smudged edges a portrait of ambition unmet. You help gather the drying sheets. Carefully. Reverently. One of them crumbles at the edge, the parchment brittle. You sigh. Scribble recopy needed, heat damage. And set it aside. Malik begins stacking the chairs. Not that anyone sits on them, we mostly use them to hold things or climb dangerously to reach high shelves. But it's part of the ritual. As the last lamp is snuffed out, Mukhtar appears one final time. He doesn't speak. He just surveys the room. Each desk. Each shelf. Each tired face. Then he nods, once, and walks away into the dark. That's as close as you'll get to a blessing. You gather your tools, your pen roll, your battered inkstone, your little cloth of margin doodles, and tuck them under your arm. Aisha is already waiting at the door. You coming? She asks. You nod. But before stepping out, you glance back. The scriptorium is quiet now. Just shadows and scent. But it hums, still. A deep, low hum that isn't sound but memory. You close the door gently behind you. The street outside is alive with crickets. The stars overhead burn clear and cold, watching. The town is half asleep, half humming. Somewhere, a flute plays a tune so old it has no name. You and Aisha walk side by side. Do you think, she says suddenly, that ink dreams? You think for a moment. Only when we forget what we wrote. She smiles. Then, almost shyly, she says, if I were a manuscript, I'd want to be stored next to yours. You feel something warm stir in your chest. I'd ask for the shelf above yours, just to be difficult. She bumps your shoulder with hers. Of course you would. You part ways at the alleyway near the mosque, promising to meet at sunrise for cataloging, or ink grinding, or mystery page decoding, or maybe all of the above. Back in your tiny room, you sit beneath the thatched roof and light a single candle. You open your notebook and begin jotting notes, not copying, not preserving, just remembering. You write, the donkey came back today. He still hates Malik. The moon poem may be a coded love letter to clouds. Aisha's setting dreams. I think she might be right. You set the notebook aside. Blow out the candle. And lie back. Above you, through the cracks in the roof, you see stars again. And maybe, just maybe, the goat. Still walking. The next morning greets you with a sigh.
Not the dramatic kind, a small, dusty sigh from the wind as it slips under your roof and tickles your ear like a nudge from an old friend reminding you it's time to rise. You blink awake beneath your palm fiber blanket, the memory of last night's stars still soft in your thoughts. A chicken clucks indignantly outside. A pot clinks somewhere down the alley. The world is waking up like a slow yawn. You roll to your feet, stretch until your joints chorus in protest, and splash water on your face from the clay jug near the door. It's cold enough to make you gasp. A moment later, you step outside. The sky is soft orange, streaked with ribbons of violet. A few wisps of cloud float lazily, as if even the heavens are in no rush. You pull your robe tighter around your shoulders and make your way toward the scriptorium, the familiar path underfoot crunching with fine sand and fallen tamarind pods. Today is cataloging day. A sacred day, a ridiculous day. A day for organizing what has long refused to be organized. You arrive just as Aisha is dragging a crate out into the open courtyard. She looks up, squints into the sun, and waves you over with her elbow. The crate, helpfully labeled weird or otherwise, is brimming with parchment scraps, half-pages, odd diagrams, and a surprisingly well-preserved drawing of what looks like a fish wearing a turban. She sighs. "This one's labeled Instructions for Negotiating with Trees," she says, holding up a tiny scroll. "Sounds more useful than most debt law," you reply, taking it from her and carefully unrolling it. The text is faded but legible. It begins, "When addressing a poem, speak with a lean. When consulting a baobab, wait until after dusk. Never argue with acacia." You laugh, but Malik, who has just appeared behind you like a silent grammar ghost, clears his throat. "That's part of the Sifr al-Ghadar collection," he mutters. Mystic ecology. Not to be mocked. You and Aisha exchange a look. She whispers, "So no tree jokes today." You nod solemnly. Noted. The morning is spent sorting. You and Aisha sit cross-legged on the mat, surrounded by parchment piles, each one stranger than the last. One features diagrams of bowls with instructions like "Only eat soup from bowls that remember the rain." Another lists 27 different names for wind, with marginal notes suggesting most of them are emotional states. Historians still argue whether these kinds of manuscripts were created by fringe scholars seeking deeper truths, or just sleep-deprived scribes who'd run out of legal cases to copy. Possibly both. At one point, you uncover a folded sheet written entirely in pictograms. A sun. A hand. A walking bird. Then a spoon. Aisha holds it up. "I think this is either a recipe or a prophecy." You reply, "If it involves a spoon, probably both." You gently flatten the pages, brushing dust from corners with the edge of your sleeve, careful not to smudge the brittle ink. You take notes on each one: language, structure, script, material. Your catalog entries are brief but descriptive. Some examples: parchment with twined border, reddish ink. Smells faintly of honey. Possible love poem or inventory list of desserts. Papyrus sheet, torn in half. Diagram of stars. Words unclear. Folded around a small stone with painted dots. Unknown purpose. Vellum page, exceptionally smooth. Margin illustration of a horse riding another manuscript. Stylized. After hours of sorting, you come across a tiny, triangular page, tucked between two fragments of Quranic commentary. It bears only a single phrase: "Where ink ends, silence begins." You pause. There's no name. No context. The calligraphy is precise, graceful, serene. You run your finger along the line.
Aisha sees it and leans over your shoulder. That one stays with you, doesn't it? You nod.
Together, you place it in its own pouch and mark the catalog entry as simply, to be remembered.
By midday, the heat has returned, clinging to your back like an old debt.
You and the others retreat inside, laying the newly organized pages into their proper boxes and chests, labeling them with wax seals and tiny clay tags.
The room smells of ink, dust, dried tamarind, and effort.
You sit with Malik for a moment by the low shelf where the spiral manuscript now rests.
He asks quietly, "Do you think any of it truly matters?" You don't answer right away.
Instead, you pick up one of the oldest texts in the room, a crumbling law book that's been recopied 36 times, its origin lost to everyone.
You open to the first page. Scrawled faintly in the margin, a smiley face. Not an illustration. Not art. Just a smile. Someone, centuries ago, added it. Probably bored. Maybe cheeky. Maybe just human. You look up at Malik. Yes, you say. Because someone smiled. He doesn't reply. But he doesn't need to.
That evening, after everything is sealed, stored, and sorted, you walk the long way home.
Past the mosque.
Past the merchant with the suspiciously talkative parrot. Past the fig tree where someone has hung a note that says, "Do not feed poetry to the goats."
You find yourself smiling. You don't know who wrote that note. But you know why. At your doorway, you stop. Look up. The stars are arriving again, one by one. And in the wind, just for a moment, you think you hear the whisper of pages being turned somewhere far beyond the sky. It's nearly full dark now. The kind of night that makes everything quieter, not just the streets, but your thoughts too.
The stars overhead seem closer somehow, crowding around like curious onlookers, blinking in time with the distant rustle of dry palm leaves. You sit on the threshold of your little room, legs stretched out into the alley, a lamp by your knee and a half-finished piece of flatbread in your hand. You're not hungry. You just like the warmth of it in your palm. Inside, the manuscripts you've worked on this week are stacked neatly in a clay-covered basket. Some bound, some loose, some still waiting to be sewn together with goat sinew and thread dyed with indigo and prayers. You lean back, listening. Somewhere in the distance, someone is drumming. Not loud. Not formal. Just a slow, private rhythm, maybe a child playing with a pot lid, maybe an old man thinking about something that happened once, long ago. You close your eyes. And in your mind, the scriptorium unfolds again. It's strange, isn't it? That a house made of mud and silence could feel so alive. In your memory, the ink is still wet, the pages still fluttering, the air still full of potential and dust. You remember the rhythm of the pens, the soft hiss and scratch of thought becoming shape. You remember the smell of ground soot, the ache of long hours bent over language that sometimes refuses to reveal itself. You also remember the laughter. The margin goats. The triumphant retrieval of airborne manuscripts. The brief, beautiful absurdity of a donkey striding in like a prophet of chaos. You think about Malik, stoic and quietly devoted, who reads every page as if truth hides in the ligature of a single syllable. You think about Aisha, who makes even legal commentary sparkle, who draws chickens with crowns and names them after constellations. You think of Mukhtar, the old master, who guides the whole mad enterprise with the calm confidence of someone who's already argued with history and won. And you think about yourself. Your tired fingers. Your bent spine. Your smudged robe. And the quiet joy that blooms in your chest every time a page is finished, dried, stacked, and tucked away for some unseen reader in a century yet to come.
You wonder if they'll understand. You hope they'll laugh at the chicken. Your eyes open again. The lamp is low now. Just a flicker. You glance at the sky and see a trail of stars across the horizon, maybe the Milky Way, maybe the outline of another forgotten story waiting to be written. You rise. Step inside. And notice something you hadn't seen before. At the very back of your little room, beneath the woven mat, there's a slip of parchment that must have fallen days ago. You tug it out, gently. It's small. Folded twice. You open it. And find just 4 words, ink remembers. You forget. There's no signature. No context. It might have been something you copied. Or something left for you. You smile. Fold it again. Tuck it inside your robe like a secret. The next morning, you'll return to the scriptorium. You'll grind ink again. You'll copy another verse about property rights or sacred water or how to avoid being eaten by a metaphorical lion. You'll sketch something in the margin, maybe a camel thinking very hard about theology. You'll sip sweet tea until your teeth ache. And you'll do what scribes have always done. Turn silence into memory. Dust into story. Breath into ink. You wake early the next morning, not because of the rooster, who, mercifully, seems to have lost interest in his alarm clock ambitions, but because the light slips through the window slats in that soft, golden way that feels like a nudge from the world itself. You stretch, yawn, and reach for your sandals with one foot, not opening your eyes yet, already knowing the route by feel. Today is the kind of day where the ink will glide easily, you tell yourself. A good day to transcribe something long and stubborn. At the scriptorium, the door is already open. Aisha is inside, halfway through setting out the reed mats and tools. She's humming something again, a tune that sounds half lullaby, half marching song. You help her. Neither of you talks much. Outside, someone is baking bread. The scent curls in under the doorway like a whisper of kindness. Today's task has been pinned to the wall with a thorn, inventory and copy of weather accounts. You squint at it. That's vague. Malik, seated in the corner like a potted judgment plant, replies, it refers to the old chronicles. Rain patterns. Wind omens. Cloud behaviors. You nod solemnly, though internally, you groan. Weather accounts are deceptively dull. But every so often, they hide small wonders, entries where scribes tired of describing humidity took poetic liberties. One such record famously described a dust storm as the sky angrily turning its pockets inside out. You find your copy in the storage chest and sit cross-legged, cracking open the stiff parchment. A list of years greets you. Alongside each one, a line of commentary, year of great rains. Camels refused to sit. Year of no moon. Traders spoke only in song. Year of stolen breeze. Wind did not return until bride price was paid. You raise your eyebrows. You copy slowly. Each entry demands care. The numerals must be exact. The words must be aligned. Every scribal tradition has its own way of tracking time, by moon, flood, rain, or gossip, and yours is no exception. By mid-morning, you're deep in the year 1322, a period marked by 3 consecutive months of unusual dew behavior and a goat-related avalanche that, by all accounts, no one saw coming. You pause. Whispered to yourself, historians still argue whether that was literal. Across the room, Aisha snorts. I bet it was just 2 goats in a hill, she says, without looking up. You reply, or a metaphor for diplomacy. The scriptorium hums on. At midday, a courier arrives.
She's young, dusty, and wrapped in a veil of pale green. She carries a scroll case slung across her back and a look of someone who's walked through 3 sandstorms and only cursed once. Mukhtar receives her with quiet nods and gestures. No one speaks loudly. Not in the presence of an unknown manuscript. The scroll is long, tied with knotted reeds. When unrolled, it crackles like a leaf that's been waiting centuries to be heard. It's not a legal document, nor a prayer, nor an astronomical map. It's a story, titled simply, "The One Who Spoke to Dust." Mukhtar holds it in his palms for a long time, then hands it to you. You blink. Me? He nods. You take it like you're accepting a baby made of flame and paper. Back at your desk, you begin reading. The story is strange. It begins with a boy who asks a question no one can answer. Not his father. Not his imam. Not the old woman who speaks to ants. So he leaves. Walks into the desert. Asks the dust itself. And the dust answers. You can feel the rhythm of it, slow, recursive, dreamy. Every paragraph loops back on itself. Some of the characters are probably metaphorical. One might be a breeze in disguise. The language is florid, ceremonial, occasionally baffling. One sentence reads, "He built a house out of questions, and slept on a bed of almost." You copy it anyway. Word for word. Because that's what you do. You're not here to judge the stories. You're here to give them a second life. Outside, the light shifts. Afternoon now, that sleepy hour when the sun gets distracted and starts pouring golden shadows through every crack in the wall. The ink dries faster in this light. The pages curl slightly at the corners. You weight them with smooth stones. Aisha has moved on to binding. She pierces the edges of finished pages with a bone needle, threads them together with string dyed in indigo and ochre. Each knot is precise. Each stitch tells time. Malik mutters corrections to himself. At one point, he gasps. You look over. He's found a grammatical inconsistency in a 200-year-old legal commentary. You brace for a full scholarly meltdown. But instead, he just nods. Almost peacefully. You exhale in relief. Even the cat seems calm. She sleeps curled on a forgotten margin draft, paws twitching slightly, perhaps dreaming of grammatical errors made of mice. You finish copying the dust story just as the final bell rings. Not a chime. Just the clink of metal on stone. The sound that means, enough for today. You stack your work. Stretch. Ink dust clings to your fingers, your sleeves, your neck. You smell like soot, old paper, and the very faintest hint of tamarind. And you feel, quietly, deeply fulfilled. Because today, you didn't just write about rain patterns or legal cases. You gave voice to dust. The sun has dipped below the western dunes, leaving behind a sky the color of burnt sugar and old vellum. The air has cooled into something gentle, like a sigh that's finally finished. You remain in the scriptorium a while longer, your tools packed but your mind lingering over the story you just copied. The One Who Spoke to Dust. It stays with you. The cadence. The mystery. The way the boy wandered into silence and returned with language that barely made sense but somehow still rang true. You feel like you've written something sacred, even if no one will ever quite agree on what it meant. You stand and take one last walk around the room. Aisha is sealing the bindings with wax, her fingers precise and steady despite the hour. Malik is gently brushing dust from an older manuscript, his touch so delicate it's almost reverent.
And Mukhtar, well, he's not here now.
But his cane leans near the door, and that's enough to feel like he's still watching.
You approach the archive shelf where your manuscript will go.
Next to the spiral text, across from the moon scroll, above the one labeled Miscellaneous Vegetable-Based Visions. You place it there carefully, whispering to no one, "May you rest well."
And then, your final task, the closing rites.
Not official ones, but the personal ritual you've made for yourself. You retrieve a tiny scrap of paper from your pouch, the one that says Ink Remembers.
You forget. And you fold it into the final page of your notebook.
Then, with a piece of charcoal, you draw a simple shape in the margin of the day's notes.
It's a hand. Open, reaching, a little clumsy. But unmistakably human. You don't sign it. That would be too much. But you smile, quietly. Then you snuff out the last lamp.
Wind down, 300 words, the night air brushes against your skin as you step into the courtyard. The stars above have gathered like listeners, each one distant, silent, watchful. The palm trees sway gently, their long fronds whispering secrets to the wind.
You move slowly now.
Not out of tiredness, but in that deliberate, dreamlike way that comes when the day's work has drawn you so deep into thought that the rest of the world feels softened. The stone beneath your feet is warm from the day, and you walk barefoot, letting the rhythm of your steps blend with the rustle of the leaves and the distant hush of the desert. Somewhere nearby, a low flute begins to play.
A tune older than memory, gentle as breath.
You pause beneath the fig tree and look up through its branches. The stars peek through, patient and unblinking.
You sit. Let your eyes grow heavy. You think of the words you've written.
The stories you've preserved. The ink that stains your fingers like gentle shadows of the past.
You breathe slowly now. In. Out. And with every breath, you feel the dust of the day settle.
The scriptorium fades. The pages quiet.
The wind holds you like an old friend.
And sleep comes, not suddenly, but softly. A slow drift.
A page turning. A story ending. But not lost. Never lost. Just resting. Waiting. Dreaming again.